Welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope. Nothing said on the Low Carb MD podcast is medical advice. Please consult your own doctor before making any lifestyle changes.
Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD podcast. We're kind of cheating today because I have someone that I actually had on Life's Best Medicine. I said, I think we should get you on Low Carb MD. And it's funny because we talk about these things, low carb, vegan diet, all these different approaches to better health. And so we can get into our little militant areas that I find. I'm carnivore, so if you have an avocado, you're going to die and you're out of the club. And so those are the kind of things I've been seeing lately too. So we had a great discussion. Troy, you can do the intro if you would like. But
Yeah.
just wanted to it would be fun to and we had a great discussion. We had a really good time. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, when I saw you were one of the low carb guys, I was like, I was going to cancel on you because I didn't want to get confrontational." I'm like, no, but we had such a great time and I learned a lot. And so it's nice to hear this of having different approaches to health and how do we just it's an N of one ultimately what works for you. So Troy, you could do the intro if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to have Sim. Am I pronouncing that right? Sim? Did I pronounce that right?
Anu,
I know.
it's
Anu.
Anu Sim. Sim,
Anu
the H is silent. Yeah.
Sim, yeah.
Thank you.
And you're a
Just like
board
Dr.
certified.
Lansky's, a difficult
Yeah,
name.
it's got the
Yeah.
S, silent S. Look, you're a board certified health and wellness coach. You're an author, right? You wrote Feed Your Microbiome to Flourish, and you were on Brian's podcast. So any friend of his is a friend of mine, and always interested to learn, maybe hear something that I haven't heard before. So I'm super excited for this, and it's not the lion's den, Brian. We're just friendly, discussion and it's all exchange and nobody knows everything, right? So
That's
we
true.
all are here to learn and
And
I
you'll see, Tro, how much we have in common. And that's why I'm excited because 9 arms of wellness, we go, okay, it's not just about what you're eating. There's a lot more to this story, right? If you're stressed,
Yeah.
intense, and hate the world and all these things. So talking about the gut microbiome perspective,
Yeah.
and that's something I think in the low carb community we've totally missed, and it's one of those things where, and I knew you were asking what is low carb and keto and all. How does all that kind of fit? So Troy, do you want to give the definitions or what you think low
Yeah, I just
carb
wanted
is?
your definition of it because everyone has a different perspective on low carb. And I just wanted to know what your stance on that was so I can speak to it from my experience and from what I. And you're totally right. Nobody knows everything. And that's one of the dangers of today's social media world. you know, a lot of nutrients are vilified, and it's at the detriment of the people who are listening to us. So that's really important to me that we stay in our zones and, we just kind of speak to what we know rather than like the other day I was on a podcast and insulin was, the host brought up insulin and she just dropped. Just insulin is a storage hormone, you know, and there was no backup of why or what, or is it a regulatory hormone? What else is happening? Is it responding to nutrients? So that puts the listener at a disadvantage. So I'm hoping that we can kind of really talk about the microbiome and what I see, how it helps even a low carb diet. So.
Yeah, well, I absolutely 100% agree. I think when you're interacting on social media, as Brian mentioned, it can be so challenging because people want simple answers and we make simple statements. Social media is not conducive really to lengthy discussions. And I think podcasts and medical papers are just for that, right? We have 45 minutes here or so to sort of discuss things. And, the papers we publish, I think also serve as, an idea of the science that we do or the science that we know. So yeah, I'm excited. And your question before we started was, what is low carb? And I think, the commonly accepted definitions, according to the, Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, is basically, depending on who you ask, but, under 120 grams of carbohydrate is the definition. And then there's very low carbohydrate diets, which, could mean under 50 gram. And that could include, 0 grams of carbohydrates, which could be, a carnivore or a zero carb diet. And predominantly, I think the theory behind lowering the carbohydrate is around lowering sugar and processed carbohydrates and essentially decreasing the glycemic load that the pancreas has to deal with. Um, but if you look into, what's interesting about a ketogenic diet, which is typically under 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates, again, depending on who you ask, and I know we've talked about this with Brian before, and we've had guests talk about the microbiome before. It's very clear that the microbiome is what modulates the seizure protection from a ketogenic diet. So, when we wipe out, when we lower the, carbohydrates in mice that have seizures, we can get them to stop having seizures. And then when we transplant their microbiome, we're able to then get other mice that to have their seizures stop. And when we give those mice antibiotic and we wipe out their flora, the seizures return. So it's very clear that, the central nervous system interaction, at least for maybe seizures and migraines, is modulated by the microbiome. And I think there's human data on mental health that supports that. So I think the problem that I've had with microbiome, and I can't wait to hear what you think about it, is, how exactly do we modulate it? And do we know exactly which species, is associated with that seizure protection, or which species is associated with weight loss, or will cause weight loss, or will change mental health benefits? I'm not certain, but I'd love to hear you talk about it. I'm not sure that medicine is caught up, but maybe you can catch me up with what science
No,
shows.
no. Yeah, I 100% agree. All the research that I've done the past few years before writing the book, um, and I think even microbiome researchers will humbly say we're just at the beginning of research, and that's important. A lot of times we just, we'll see something which is mechanistic and we'll say, okay, let's run with this. But what I have seen that clearly all the research pointing out to is one thing, that fiber is important, and fiber is important at so many levels because of short chain fatty acid production, insulin sensitivity, all of that has some good data. And even if we look past the microbiome health, if you look at cardiovascular health, there's so many different incredible studies that are pointing to cardiovascular health and about 30 grams of fiber. So my whole book and approach is about feeding the microbiome. And I think it can be done when you have an intentional low carb diet as well. Because in my practice, I have many clients who come in who are metabolically inflexible. They have insulin resistance, high blood pressure, cholesterol issues. They respond, of course, to an low carb diet, but then as a coach, my whole thing is how do I get them to stick to the diet? It has to be a diet that they completely buy into. And I think that is the bigger question sometimes, because we can talk all day about, oh, this is the perfect diet, or this helps the microbiome, this helps the brain, or this helps, but the health, health of the heart health and stuff. But if a client is not responding to it, or if they're not sticking to it, then this just becomes a conversation. So that's pretty much how I handle, you know, my protocols. It's really client centered. It's client led, and really asking the client, what are your thoughts about carbohydrates? Or is there something that you feel like is a non-negotiable in your diet? Because I will have clients come in and say, Oh, I know I'm not doing fruits anymore. And then they'll tell me, I don't do fruits because I heard someone say that eating fruits is just as bad as eating a Hershey's bar. So as a coach,
That was
my
Tro who said that.
responsibility
He
is
said
like,
fruit was poison.
yeah, fruit is, well, I mean, yes.
He's
And for
teasing. So
me as a coach, I'm put in this where I have to explain this science and then ask the client, what do you think? If we did this as an experimental goal, try a Hershey's bar versus a fruit, are we going to see a difference? Is there going to be a difference? So everything is rooted in a client's response to food rather than my saying a carb rich diet or a carb low diet or a keto diet or a vegan diet is the only way to do it. That's pretty much my stance. I'm not religious about food rules, but I find it very interesting that the microbiome, the brain, hormones, all of that makes such a big difference in weight loss. And we're just not a closed system. And I've tried the calories in, calories out approach for a very long time, but I see that all of this really does make a difference. And we can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, I
I,
think it's so important. I think it's so important, Tro, because look at this. So let's just get to a case, just a little
do you,
quick case
do,
study.
before we go to the case study, can we explore around like, I think Brian, there's often a lot of agreement, and I think like the real beauty in these podcasts are maybe in exploring those areas we don't agree. So after your case study, actually, maybe we can explore some of those areas of fiber supplementation that maybe I think are worth exploring. I've noticed. Maybe we'll start with that. So go with your case, and then maybe we can
Well,
come back to
I'll
fiber.
make the point of saying, okay, look, let's take Sean Baker, who's a lot bigger and stronger than me, right? So Sean just recently, and I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a solid guy, carnivore. Says, look, I have this injury that's not healing, so he went back to a ketogenic diet because he knows ketones can help inflammation, but ketones also help the lining of the gut. So, say he has leaky gut syndrome and he has a lot of inflammation going. Now you have the other carnivore that used to be carnivore, Paul Saladino, right? So now he's adding in honey and fruit, and a lot of people are upset with him for doing that. But he's doing what works for him and he feels better. And he's metabolically healthy. Sean Baker's metabolically healthy. So what I'm saying is if you're an accountant who's 300 pounds and you're diabetic and you're sitting at your desk all day, you're not Paul Saladino and you're not Sean Baker. So maybe we need to change for those. It's an individualized thing that we have to do for our nutrition. So if it works for him and he's feeling well, like, would you argue that Paul Saladino's sick, Tro, by adding in honey and fruit into his diet?
Well, I certainly don't know his health, but I'm curious. Sean Baker's adding back carbohydrate. Is that? I didn't know that.
No, he's doing more ketogenic, adding in like things to raise his ketone level to get into ketosis because he knows it's natural anti-inflammatory
Got it. So he's looking to decrease the
to heal
inflammation.
an injury. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that his cervical spine that he was injured, or?
I can't remember. I don't know specifically. He just said he had an injury. I haven't talked to him, so I would love to have both those guys on and just talk about their perspectives at some point. But the
Yeah, I
point
think.
is,
But
I'm seeing
again,
it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, I think both are just, I mean, it's very anecdotal, right? I mean, what am I as a coach going to do with that? I can't generalize that what they're doing in their life to my clients because a client is unique. Their approach to life, food is social, food is a community, food is, metabolic. There's so many different aspects to food that we can't really look at someone else and say, especially when it's not 100% backed by science yet. I do say yet because I mean, we have so many studies on the microbiome and, diets that are, how fiber is important and things like that. But the whole carnivore diet is just starting to be this thing people are taking notice of. And I do have clients who come in and say, I really want to just try the carnivore diet. And my job as a coach is not to say, no, that is not going to work for you. To dig deeper to find out why they want to be on a carnivore diet. And is it sustainable long term? And that is the biggest job I have as a coach, to find out, is there a sustainability in the diet? Is this something that after 2 or 3 weeks they're going to just go back to the standard American diet? There's so many questions. So that's why I feel really frustrated when I see people on these podcasts who are just saying this is the only diet or this is the only way. I don't agree. I don't feel like it's food is very bio-individual, and I think we need to respect that.
So I want to explore some of the things you said. I've been taking notes, and like, excuse me, because I think when I focus on disagreement, people think that it's hostile, and I don't want to come off that way. I so respect you, and I want to just explore and give you a chance to sort of air out, things that maybe I'm misunderstanding. Um, you said a couple of things that struck me. Like, I think most people are looking for simple food rules, right? And they're looking for, like, fiber is healthy, or fruit is healthy, or more protein is healthy, right? I think the lay public, wants that, right? They want easy rules to follow. And I think as a coach, when you're trying to look at the evidence and then help people, you want to give as much truth as you possibly can. You want to understand what we know and then guide these people as best as you possibly can. And this is the problem I have with essentially promoting fiber and promoting fruit, which I have nothing against. But from a strict intellectual point of view, there's never been an interventional study that's shown that fiber reduces cardiovascular endpoints, all-cause mortality, right? Otherwise, Metamucil would have done the study, and they would have been a even bigger company than they are, right? So they haven't done that, right? And all we've relied on is like the Nurses Health Study, EPIC study, all these observational studies where maybe you eat more fruit, maybe you get better. Most of the curves for fruit, show that the mortality benefit stops at around 2 fruits, right? And you don't get more mortality benefit above that. So I feel like, and certainly if you look at fibrous, starchy vegetables, that mortality benefit isn't there, at all. Um, so I think, like, as a coach or as a doctor, we want to, pretend that there's this health halo over certain groups of foods, fruit being one and fiber being another, and we'll point to, these potential and interesting physiologic benefits like the microbiome. It is very interesting, and it is certainly a very powerful, the gut-brain axis is very powerful. I think it's under research, but to look at a client and say, you need to eat more fiber. In fact, you need 30 grams, right? Or you need to eat more fruit, um, without that hard data, I just find it fake. Tell me
Yeah, well,
if I'm looking at it wrong,
uh-huh. Well, I mean, the
I
research that
feel fake.
I've,
Like, if I feel fake, like, I think I eat green leafy vegetables and
yeah.
occasionally I have fruit. So, and I think that I'm doing something healthy. Don't get me wrong. So, but as a recommendation,
As a
I feel fake.
recommendation, I mean, I think there are enough studies that do show that fiber is very important. Like, for example, there's the Iowa Women's Health Study, there's a meta-analysis in the Lancet, the AHA, all pointing to maybe about 25 to 30 grams of fiber. But that's, again, if a client comes to me really struggling, they have a condition like SIBO or IBS. There's no point in me saying you need to take in 30 grams of fiber. That is what I am really referring to, that it's very client led. If they're in pain, they have gut issues, maybe a carnivore diet is the way to go for them. I mean, who am I to say that's not going to work for you? But long term, I think there is such benefit from fiber, and there's so much data that does show that. Fruit, we do know that fruit for some people, like I'm South Asian, struggle all the time with insulin resistance. I am striving for more insulin sensitivity. So, am I going to eat a lot of high glycemic fruits? No. Am I going to eat like how my ancestors ate, lots of rice and stuff? Because no, my life is not like how my great grandfather's was. He used to walk like 20 to 30 miles a day, not because he was rocking or something. He had to go to work and there was no transportation. I can't compare my life with that. So everything has changed. So we really have to kind of, I'm saying it's very bio-individual. And to really say there's only one kind of diet for everyone is I don't agree. So some people may thrive on a meat-based diet, and I have nothing against having more protein or more good fats and things like that. But to not have any fruits and vegetables, I don't know about that. I mean, I feel
Yeah,
like
and I think that's an important point. I think that's what I'm looking at too, saying, okay, look, if you're adding fruits and so the fiber throw, there's actually a lot of good data on fiber. One being inulin. So there's a study they did with inulin. They took obese diabetic patients, split them into two groups, eating the same diets, and they said, let's add inulin to one group and just see what happens. When they added inulin, they had more insulin sensitivity, more weight loss. They felt better, right? So you go, why is that? Inulin's feeding the gut microbiome. So interestingly enough, and I knew you're the expert, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But if you feed the gut microbiome right, who makes short chain fatty acids? The majority is coming from your gut microbiome. So
yes,
if you're
and
not making,
butyrate especially, we want butyrate for, and again, this is something, Dr. Yo, I see this in my clients who eat a lot more protein. As long as they're eating some fiber, and that fiber could come from a fiber supplement or the fiber of their choice, right? It could be like a mixed fiber thing. What happens is you are supporting your microbiome. So the microbes in your colon, they're not very good at proteolytic fermentation. So they've evolved to really support digesting these fibers. So eating that fiber becomes almost like it's an evolutionary thing that we've done. So I see such a difference, like when granted, a microbiome test today is not diagnostic in nature, but out of curiosity, let's say a client does a microbiome functional analysis test and they see that the proteolytic fermentation is pretty high, so you begin to wonder, why is it that most of the protein needs to be digested before it ends in the distal colon? Why is there so many toxic metabolites? Then I see clients who eat meat but also eat a lot of fiber, meaning lots of low carb vegetables and things like that. And there's a little bit more balance there, and they don't have as many toxins, toxic metabolites. So you wonder about that. And I see a shift when someone says, hey, I want to improve my microbiome, and they go about 6 to 8 months and make these small shifts. There's definitely a change. And again, that's anecdotal. That's what's happening in my practice. I'm not saying that this is supported by, I mean, definitely most of the microbial research supports that the gut microbiome's major fuel is fiber. And you're supporting their well-being because their well-being supports us. It's very simplistic, but generally I think that works as an explanation to my clients, because then they understand the value of fiber. They understand the value of choosing grapes over a Hershey's bar, just having a little bit of fiber. And again, to answer your question, we're talking about the layperson who may not understand the difference between a Hershey's bar and grapes.
I struggle to I'm really having some struggle around some of this. I've heard the idea that, feeding the gut microbiome increases like the benefit of inulin that you mentioned, Brian. Um, that was a short-term randomized control study. They've also done, other short-term randomized control studies with, like, let's say, psyllium husk lowering LDL. But does that do anything over the long term? It's really unclear, right? It sounds good, certainly.
Well, I think the point is, and gosh, I've
But
talked
I'm
to
like,
several docs, and so one of this theoretical ideas, yeah, I don't think it's theoretical anymore, but William Davis, when I interviewed him, he has a good book called Super Gut, talking about taking care of your gut microbiome. He said, when I interview him, I go, "What do you think of carnivore diet?" And he goes, "Initially, it's great because it does get rid of a lot of the bad microbiome. You want the good people to take over the neighborhood, right?" Long term, he's concerned Akkermansia. Some of these bacteria, if you starve them of sugar, they have no fiber to run on, what do they start eating? Your gut micro, your mucus layer of your colon. Guess what? That is a disaster always. So if you can maintain your mucus layer of your colon, autoimmune disease goes way up if you don't maintain that. Tons of health problems and fatigue and brain fog and all those things. So you say, what's the harm of adding in a little bit of some good fibers, resistant starches, things like that?
I'm very curious about long term on just like a carnivore diet. I'm really interested in that because I don't know if there are any. So I'd love to see your opinion about that because you were talking
I
about
th
long term for fiber. There's a lot of data saying that fiber is very important for the health of your microbes. And is that what is troubling for you is that long-term data around what the microbes are doing for us, or is it the fact that why should one take in fiber? I'm trying to.
Well, I think that people who are having the issues are people who are type A, very strict, and they go, "I'm there. All I'm going to do from now on is eat meat. That's it." And so we know, I mean, you look at the data, because I've been looking at this. There's a microbiome for Parkinson's disease. There's a microbiome for depression. There's a microbiome for anxiety. There's one for Alzheimer's disease. And you look at it and go, all of those have in common less diversity of your gut microbiome. So if we go to, there's studies on cows, like in America, we give all the cows a ton of antibiotics. Why? It makes them fatter. It makes them fatter. That's what the data shows. And they've done the same research with mice. We've done the same research with women. If women are pregnant and they take antibiotics, amoxicillin for a sinus infection when they're pregnant, they go from having 800 species of gut microbiome to 400 to 200. Like the more antibiotics you take, and in these mice, they showed if they took a bunch of antibiotics when they were small, no matter what they did, they couldn't replace those. They're gone, So I'm looking to say, well, what happens long term if you don't appease some of these gut microbiome and they die off and you need them as part of your community? So if you think of the gut microbiome as a bunch of our community, once if you don't have any taxi drivers or garbage collector people and you lose these guys, then what? Your society doesn't work right? So what I'm seeing, Tro, is I'm looking at gut microbiome and I'm seeing, and I'm not saying it's a cause, but I'm just saying I'm seeing a lot of carnivores who have leaky gut and very narrow diversity in their gut microbiome.
And again, I think maybe not initially, because if they are switching from a standard American diet to a carnivore diet, anything could be an improvement on a standard American diet. They come in eating ultra processed foods, high in
Totally.
sugar,
Absolutely.
high in refined carbs. I mean, you think about it, flour and sugar, I mean, I think we'll all agree are something that's just not beneficial to us. And our microbes look at it as like, what the heck is this? I mean, so there are specific pathogenic bacteria that really feed off of that, and beneficial bacteria really benefit from the fiber. So we say bifidobacterium, really well studied strains. And I'm not talking about every bacteria, but really Lactobacillus reuteri, Akkermansia, all of these really benefit from the fiber rich foods that we eat. But I also feel like if someone is feeling better on a carnivore diet. I was on a podcast the other day, and the host said, I just eat meat and a little bit of fat. No vegetables, no fruits, and none of that. And she said, I feel great. And then we started talking about the microbiome, and she said, "Well, I feel so full on my protein, I don't have room for anything else." So that is I mean, when we think about vegetables and fruits, you think about micronutrients and vitamins and things that we don't produce and we get from the diet. Would you agree that vegetables do have a lot of micronutrients? And how many things can you get from a supplement? Just like on the other opposite spectrum, someone who's vegan and who's completely off of animal protein may need to substitute certain things with a B12 or also the omega-3s and things like that. I think there's a detriment to labels is my stance. I mean, really hard diet rules are very challenging for people, and if we are to just look at science and not just anecdotes, because I think nutrition today is just a lot of anecdotal things and not rooted in science. And I have a hard time with that, because what am I supposed to tell the client who's comes with all this information, and I'm looking for studies that back up every single thing? It doesn't work. I think it's better to really talk to people and say, why do they want to do it? And as doctors, I think you will agree that when a patient comes to you, it's very challenging. You can give them a list of things to follow, but what are the chances that they are actually going to stick to it 3 months from now? So we need to finally get that conversation to, is this going to work for a particular client? If a client does really well from going from an standard American diet to a carnivore diet, I mean, there's no argument there. They are feeling better. But eventually, I think a responsibility of people like us would be to ask the bigger question: is this sustainable? How is your blood picture? What's happening? Let's look deeper, because sometimes they may not be symptomatic, but who knows down the road? I mean, how is your lipid picture? How's your ApoB? How's your LP little a? Just all of that really matters when we talk about food. And I think the big question really goes back to the client or the patient and what is right for them.
I think that's a huge thing. Like, what can we stick to? What works for you socially, religious reasons? We have a lot of reasons for what we eat, and people get very religious about their diet, right? So one of my patients who was carnivore, he was getting really upset with me when we had this discussion. I go, look, I'm not speculating here. I'm looking at your gut microbiome. We just did a test on it, and you have leaky gut. You have all these issues going on. So maybe what's the harm of adding in a teaspoon of fiber here and there, or doing whatever, these kind of things, and seeing how you feel? You're completely true. This is not me saying this. I'm telling you, this is Rob Sivas has been talking about having people on a long-term carnivore diet. All of a sudden, they start getting their A1C starts going up, their insulin level starts going up. Why? Their inflammatory markers start going up. That's telling you it's not working for that person. I'm not saying everyone, I'm just saying for that person. So I have a guy, just as a case study, he had leaky gut, he had all these things, carnivore diet. He didn't change his diet one bit, except we added in fiber. We added some stuff to heal his gut lining. I just showed my PA yesterday. His LDL cholesterol went from 299 down to 97 in months. And you go, and his triglycerides dropped dramatically. And you go, there was no other intervention.
Yeah.
If your gut is not healthy.
There are several studies for soluble fiber and the viscous fiber and what it does to cholesterol, LDL. And even if we just think about ApoB versus anything else, that I think most people will agree that that's a big marker. I have seen major improvement in my practice with just that ApoB number with diet, exercise, both, and just adding that soluble fiber. I have many clients who are on a very low carb diet, but who add the fiber in. Fermented foods, things like that have really made a huge difference in these people. And I actually work with a doctor who sends me a lot of his patients, and we kind of look at it together to see, wow, this made a difference. That's all we can do, is because everybody's bodies and their systems are so different. It's really hard for me to come up with a bunch of blanket rules because it doesn't work. It just works differently for different people, and that's why nutrition is so challenging and difficult. I just feel like if we could just, that's why I have my protocol is, I call it MBHR, microbiome, brain, hormones, and reframing the mindset. All of that's very important. And my 9 arms is part of that, reframing the mindset, because we can talk all day about which diet is the best, but if your client or patient is not compliant, it doesn't really help. Yeah.
Not only that, and we know this, and Tro and I have lamented, and we've talked about this. We could have someone on a perfect low carb or a ketogenic diet, and they don't lose weight. And they go, well, how's life? I'm fighting with my husband all day. I'm stressed out. So all these things, stress, tension, all these things screw up our gut microbiome. There's no animal that eats when they're stressed, right? They don't eat when they're stressed. If you take your dog and you put them in a new environment, they'll look around and make sure they'll walk the perimeter. They check. You could put their favorite food there and they're not going to eat it. If a deer's getting chased by a lion, it's not going to stop and eat something. It's running. But when we get into a fight with our spouse, we want to eat cookies. So you see, and so I think just starting from the high level where we all agree, I think, is, hey, let's get rid of processed food. Let's get rid of all the bad stuff, all these dyes and all these kind of things in our diet, and give our gut microbiome the best benefit. So there's a low carb influencer out there, one of the leaders in the low carb, and I brought up gut microbiome, and he tells his people to drink Diet Coke and it's fine, there's no calories. Like, guess what? It screws up the gut microbiome, and there's definite hunger signals. And so I think we have to look at that. We can't say, well, there's no calories in, tequila is low. Like so many people on a ketogenic diet, they drink tequila all the time and they go, well, there's no sugar in that, so I could drink it, so it doesn't affect my. Well, it affects a lot
That's
of.
the problem with just kind of vilifying nutrients, I mean, it's really hard to do that in nutrition. And a lot of researchers just stay away from it or don't speak to it because they don't know what to say. It's like, it's very challenging. And I think that's my problem about generalizing. I can't do that with clients. And I think we have a responsibility towards the people we serve to kind of let them make the choice, and we kind of counter it with, have you looked at this study or that study, or simplify the science a bit, but it has to be client led. But I agree with you, Dr. Lansky, that I think when you simplify it and say sugar is evil, if something does not have sugar, it's fine. That's the same Hershey's bar analogy that I made, I mean, grapes have. Yes, grapes today especially has a lot of sugar. And would I have like a bunch of grapes, without any protein? No. And that would be silly. If I had my CGM on, it would just shoot up, definitely. And someone who is insulin resistant, I would be very, very uncomfortable having a bunch of grapes without any kind of fiber or protein to support it. But at the same time, equating that to like a candy bar with artificial sweeteners and, junk in it just doesn't make sense. And that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to step away from when people ask me for, well, what are the 3 things that you do in your diet? Well, what does it matter? I mean, I'm very different from you. My microbiome is different. My lipid picture is different. My genetics are different. Doesn't really help. We can make some simple rules, and my simple rules would be eat a balanced diet, make sure you have enough protein, good fats, and fiber on your plate. And that's something all of us can do. And just make sure there's enough diversity so your microbiome is supported, your brain and your gut-brain axis is supported, and then see how your body responds to it.
Yeah, I'm going to poke around at some of what I think is our assumptions that were made here. When you look at the data for the microbiome, it's not, if you're looking at observational data, there's some importance to having diversity. If you look at animal models and low microbial diversity because they're germ free, or because they've never, like, whether it's a hormetic stress or a benefit is unclear really to having a diverse microbiome. And certainly a low microbial diversity has been associated with bad things. But I think diversity in itself is not the issue. We've done fecal transplants, for very specific composition of microbiomes that seem to, affect health outcomes. So I think the blanket, we want to have diversity. I think, and I'm not sure that that's the case. We certainly don't
You want
want.
diversity with good microbiome. You don't want diversity of all the bad ones. So you want to have what we see in the gut microbiome, Tro, is if you have bifidobacterium, lactobacillus, those are both lacking, by the way, in obesity, diabetes. And so there's certain things that we see missing all the time. That has a huge role in the immune
Is that
function, these
because
two
of
guys.
fiber, or is that because of the glyphosate that's in or is that
Well, what
because,
feeds them? I mean, you have
Well, you
like,
have to see what feeds them. And
yeah.
like Faecalibacterium pronitiae, which is a key member in your Firmicutes phyla, really responds to fibrous foods, and resistant starches, polyphenols. I mean, when you really think about plant foods like polyphenols, flavonoids, the bioavailability is very low. And that's where the microbiome comes in. They are able to digest that and produce things like short chain fatty acids. That's something that's been very clear over a lot of studies. And I can actually send you those studies. And they actually use that, the energy extraction from food. All of that is dependent on the microbial composition. You can really compare two people with very different microbial pictures and how they extract energy from food and their ratios. And even that is debatable, and I'll agree with you that, for example, for the longest time, we thought firmicutes, bacteroidetes, balanced really kind of dictated how someone extracted elevated ratios meant obesity, but that's not across the board. So there's a lot that we do not know, but the one thing that I feel like every research points out to is that the food that they really thrive on is fiber and fiber resistant starch, polyphenols, flavonoids, and they all come from the plant kingdom. I mean, and you really think about it, like 20 of the drugs, a third of the 20 of the drugs that we taken today in America comes from plants. And so to just say all plants and fruits are bad for you, I think
Who
is
said
like
that?
throwing the
I'm
baby
sorry.
out the.
Who said that? You said just who said that? You've said that
I,
twice. So
no,
who
no,
said
no. I
that?
don't think you said that, but I
Yeah,
said
but who
I'm
who did
saying.
say that? I hear this often, like, you know, uh, somebody who like vilifies certain foods. Like I hear that as a trope, and so that's why I'm asking you. I've never, we've interviewed 400 people here. I've never heard anybody say that, that nobody should eat fruit. I've never heard it once. I don't know, Brian, if you've ever heard it, tell me if I'm wrong. I've never heard anybody
Well, not
say,
that, I mean, if you're
out of the
carnivore by
400 people we've
definition.
interviewed, I've never heard it once said. And people say that. People say, that somebody out there
I
said,
don't think the influencers necessarily, but I think there's a lot of people out like the guy I'm saying, hey, add some fiber. You have leaky gut. Because part of it's look, I'm looking and say everything we do in medicine is risk and benefits. I go, what's the risk of adding adding glutamate to your diet or adding things that may help feed the gut microbiome? Is there any downside to that? Is there
yeah.
any downside other than to say you don't need that?
I've never even heard a patient say that. I mean, maybe I'm getting like the best
Oh,
patients in the
no, no.
world. I've never
No,
heard a
I hear
patient
it.
say, "Oh, I'm just never gonna." I've heard I don't like
Tro,
vegetables.
look on social media, Paul Saladino, the heat he's taking because he added in honey and fruit. Like people think he's the devil now.
How do you know it's a bot? Like I don't. That's a real person. Like, that's
No,
not.
there's
I've
people
never
that
met a real person actually say this, and I've
Oh,
heard it.
no.
I've heard it by so many people who talk about it, but it's such a trope. I wouldn't even discuss it. I wouldn't
well,
say
we would say,
so
like
many
for
people
us,
say that because
we
I've
would
never heard.
say, like
But
I
let
Never
would
me
heard.
ask
say,
you this. But
yeah.
if you were talking to someone who is on a carnivore diet or a low carb diet, wouldn't you say that there's a possibility that they really think that all fruits or plants or any plant source could be not great for them? At least have this feeling that, oh, that's going to up my blood sugar or something similar to that. I mean,
For
wouldn't
sure.
I,
that be?
I've never seen. I
For
just. I
sure.
mean,
I mean,
I've
I
never
feel
seen
that.
that.
I mean, honestly, I feel that way. I mean, I have a patient who got diagnosed. He used to eat candy all the time. He switched over to just eating grapes, and he ate grapes, and he got full blown DKA from grapes. He had a thing of grapes, and he ate them all day, and that was his snack, and he got full blown diabetes. So I'm like, okay, that's not a good idea, probably, right? Especially with our very. So if you're drinking fruit juice, I've had people go into DKA from going on a fruit fast. I mean, a juice fast because you're drinking all juice. So
But
Gundry, he
Brian,
was
hold
getting
on.
it.
But Brian, if there's pulp in it, if they leave the pulp, it'll feed the microbiome.
Well, the best thing was Gundry was getting picked on by a couple of vegans, and they were just seriously, it was disrespectful the way they were treating him. And they
Well,
said,
I
you
saw
said,
him.
well,
I
wait,
saw
wait,
him
wait.
I saw him on a podcast, and there was like this grape versus chocolate, which I've heard twice today. If you're looking at polyphenols, the chocolate is more polyphenols than the grape,
Yeah,
right?
but if it's
So
dark chocolate, not the
If it's
yeah,
dark
milk
yeah.
chocolate,
chocolate,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
I'm just saying and nobody's done an interventional study to even say, even if you do a candy bar, like I don't know, if you have a piece of a candy bar, right? Like once in a while, is that better than a grape? Nobody's done that study. I would just avoid both. Like, why are we
But
even
what
talking
I'm
about it?
saying is, it's very simplistic to say that to a layperson, because they're not going to look at it and say, "Oh, the reason he's saying is today's grapes are this." And I'm not here to pick on one little comment someone made, but I see this very often
It's
that clients come in with these little half truths from people from in the influence in
But we've
social
done so many
media.
half truths just here today. We have
Yeah,
done so
so
many
so
half
can we
truths
all
like here, all
agree?
of
Can we
us.
all agree
All
that
of us have done it. Like Brian said it. Hey, the microbiome is that, you've said it. Everything we've said
well,
today is
true.
half
But the
truths.
point of news she's making, you're taking that out of
Yeah.
context, I think. The point she's making is you can't just say a calorie is a calorie. Like you're eating 1,000 calories of gummy bears versus 1,000 calories of salmon. It's totally a different thing. So the argument of saying, okay, grapes are chocolate's bad, but grapes are good, right? Like the point is, if you're metabolically healthy, does it really matter that much here and there having? So it's going to be life in the way. So the point I was making with Gundry is they were attacking him. He said, "No, you guys are. I'm not against juicing. You guys are just doing it wrong." And he goes, "What do you mean we're doing it wrong?" He says, "You should
I mean,
be
at the end of the
juicing
day,
out the
Dr. Gundry
fiber
doesn't, yeah, he doesn't
and pour
say
out the
that.
juice. Pour out the juice and
Nobody's-
eat the fiber.
Oh,
You'll
that's
be
just,
fine. You'll be better, right?"
I don't think he's really pro meat or anti something. It's just those little sound bites that are
Yeah.
very, I hope people don't take that away from today's conversation. All I'm saying is let's keep it simple for the people who are listening. Food is personal. Food is, if you are, you have insulin resistance, then there are certain diets that are better for you. But the underlying thing is the microbiome does matter. I mean, when I started looking into the microbiome, it was just when the Human Microbiome Project had just started. And I had my own gut issues that got me excited about it. And I thought maybe this is the puzzle that I'm missing. And personally, I just really felt so much better when I went back to adding fibrous foods and things like that. I was granted a very standard American diet at that point for convenience. That's what most of us in America do. We just, we're working. We just find something that's convenient, and my microbiome had taken a beating, and 100% very anecdotal. This is what happened in my case, and it started making me feel like I just needed to feed them better. But that was when the Human Microbiome Project had just started. We didn't have as much research. But today, if you look in PubMed, there's microbiome research around, and I'm not talking about 20 people in a research. I'm just talking about observational studies. I'm talking about epidemiological studies. I'm talking about RCTs. I'm talking about meta-analysis. There's just so much. And the big underlying thing is fiber is important as a fuel for your microbiome, and supporting your microbiome really is not just gut related, but cardiovascularly important. It's important for your brain because of the gut-brain axis. It reduces inflammation. Saying it this way may make it sound simplistic, but basically when they take in the fiber, really helps them to produce something called short-chain fatty acids, butyrate especially. That really helps us with, inflammation, making us more insulin sensitive. Hormones like GLP-1, really supports that. So there's been a lot.
Satiety,
You
true.
can't
I know
really
you.
just, yeah, you
I know
can't
you're
go.
looking nutty, but I'm telling you, and just as
Look,
anecdotal.
no, no,
I
look,
admit
I'm
it.
fine. Like I eat vegetables, Brian. Brian, I eat vegetables, and I know I eat vegetable. I eat cucumber. I eat salads. My wife make. I eat it. I love. I
But
actually like it.
the point is this, Tro.
But
Look,
like like here's the thing, right? Ketogenic diets make butyrate. They decrease IL-6, right? Like literally, you're making butyrate. You have endogenous butyrate being produced.
correct,
So
correct.
But
No,
again, the
so that's a
ketogenic
benefit
diet
of the
could be.
ketogenic diet.
So what I'm saying is this, like, but I don't know that, we don't, is it better if it's delivered through the gut? Is it better if it's delivered through your own fat sources? I'm not certain.
So
Is it
just
better
say
if the
just say
intermediate-6 is like, I just don't
say
know.
you're low carb, Tro.
Yeah.
If you're not making butyrate, right?
Well,
As you would with a ketogenic diet, right? So what's wrong with just taking butyrate or saying, hey, my gut microbiome that makes butyrate. Once if I lose that part of my gut microbiome, right? Short chain fatty acid. You said it yourself, Tor, and I would challenge you just to try this for the heck of it on your just to keep an open mind. So
No, I've done fiber supplementation. I've done psyllium husk supplementation in patients. I've done it. I've all done it.
no,
But
for
it's
you,
always,
like I've
yeah,
seen you. Well, when we're going on the cruise together in a few weeks, but
yeah.
if you eat that much meat and you go, I'm eating all this meat, I can't get satiety. I'm still hungry, right? So you go, what happens if I add some short chain fatty acids to that and see what happens? Short chain fatty acids give satiety. Once if you're not making enough short chain fatty acids.
Listen, Brian, I've eaten broccoli until it hurt. I can't.
Well, can I just say that
Yeah.
that's my thing. Feeding your microbiome just doesn't mean just eating broccoli. There's so many fermentable fibers that really
Oh, I
support.
have them all. I mean, I have a lifetime of drinking, kefir and a lifetime of having, fermented vegetables. I mean, it's not like I just for me, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I believe that it's so clear. If you look at C. diff, if you look at fecal transplants for depression, the gut-brain axis is real. Its effects on inflammation are real. I check fecal calprotectin on so many patients. Anyone with autoimmune disease, I'm there with you looking at. Okay, so the calprotectin there is the lactoferrin there. We've sent MRT testing. I mean, I'm with you all, but it's all right now for me. I don't know. It seems like a bit of half truths. Maybe I just need to read more.
I don't know. It's half truth. I think we're saying we don't know the answer. We're saying what is the harm of saying let's add in some fiber to your diet? What's the downside that you might get gas, right? I mean, you look at it and go,
I think that's how science really is from anecdotes and, interest in learning more. And I think for us, just experimenting with it and just saying maybe 1 week of just trying 30 grams of
yeah.
fiber along with the protein, because the protein is what's really, I mean, protein is important. No one can take that away from, I completely 100% agree. But why not feed yourself and your microbes as an experimental goal for like
Or
a
the other
week
way
or
around.
two?
Or the other way around, like an elimination diet of doing no fiber or no protein or low
Yeah.
protein, right? So like
Yeah. And then
if
you
we're
add it
if
back
we're
in.
talking about experimenting, because we've said a lot of these half truths, which is everybody should have fiber, or everybody can agree, or everybody should have protein, everybody can agree. If I had cancer, right? If I had cancer right now, I probably would be eating very low protein, you
Yeah,
know?
or if you have kidney disease. But I'm not, I mean, protein, again, we're making an assumption that protein comes just from animal protein, right? For someone with
Even
cancer,
plant protein, I'd
yeah,
probably be very
yeah.
low in it. So like this is a tough discussion to have. And I think, I just that tendency for all of us is to come up with these truths. But, I guess maybe I should do some testing. What
I don't think
testing?
it's a truth. I think it's
What
really saying, look, what works for you. Like if I have a carnivore who's
what's
not
the
doing well,
what testing was like? So how would you? So can you walk me through? And I'd love this question because I think this will help me. Walk me with the ideal patient and the ideal sort of dysfunctional microbiome you'd see, and then the intervention that you do and what you'd expect. Because that would help me like understand for both of you. I'd love to answer that question. I know
yeah.
Brian's got like 2 seconds left, so
No, I'm
so
good. I know,
maybe
I can be a couple
yeah,
minutes.
yeah. So
You want
maybe
me?
just yeah, both of you guys answer it. I'm just curious. Like walk me through the ideal patient and the intervention you do and the outcome that you'd like to see and or have seen?
Okay, most of my clients are come to me for weight loss, and some of them have gut issues. So it's not a diagnostic test, but the test that I use is whole genome sequencing, and has a good idea of what the distal colon looks like in the test. So when I read the test, and there's like the client has like 30 species, I point that out and say, are you open to doing certain things to increase your species diversity and richness? And that's what a resilient microbiome is. A resilient microbiome is one that has both evenness and diversity as per the definition. So if a client is willing to do it via food, and do a lot of prebiotic fibers, then we do that for about 3 months to 6 months.
So that looks like kimchi, psyllium husk,
Yeah, so the
sauerkraut.
diet that I propose is like in foundational layers. That's your fruits and vegetables and diversity in that, and of course taking their metabolic picture into account. So someone who's diabetic, I'm not going to add any high glycemic foods. Just really kind of focus on lower ones, increase resistant starch, green bananas. Things like that, oat bran, if they do well on that. And again, they would probably be on a CGM to look at spikes and see how their body responds to it. And then we keep tracking it. And if they start feeling better and they say, oh my gosh, I feel better, I feel clearer, I feel like my gut is doing better. Just 1 week of one client just being on a fiber supplement, she was doing so much better, especially women, Dr. They struggle with constipation, a lot of them, and they start having better bowel movements. They started feeling clearer. So, and again, it's all about tweaking. Oh my gosh, I just got really gassy on that. I can't do that. So we just pull back on things like that and really look at the client for answers. That's why food is it's so bio-individual. So I can't really generalize and say, okay, it's going to work across the board for everybody. But having some general rules of how to up the fiber and increase prebiotic fibers, flavonoids, things like that, and fermented foods usually comes last, especially if they have gut issues. If someone has SIBO or IBS, I'm not going to start them on kimchi. They're not going to do well on it. They're not going to do well on kefir because of the fermentation. And we take them through that, maybe add a probiotic, a good, well-studied strain that is beneficial for them, like some BB lactose 12 has been studied for constipation. Add a few well-studied strains and then check again in 6 months. And yes, the test itself will show an increase in bacteria, increase in how their saccharolytic fermentation is doing, the proteolytic fermentation. All that gives me clues, but the client itself gives me the most. If they're feeling better, they're feeling they've lost weight, they're able to manage their weight. That is a big question. Anyone on a low carb diet is going to lose weight. It's water, glycogen initially, but long run, how are they going to sustain that weight loss is my thing, because 80% of people who lose the weight gain it back. So as a weight loss coach, that is my biggest interest, is to see how do we make this sustainable. And I think the microbiome has a big part to do with it. And so we run with that. We run with that protocol, and they usually don't gain the weight back when they stick to it, when they stick to this diet. This is what I see in my practice. And I am so confident of it. I always tell my clients, if you gain the weight back, you come back to my program gratis, because I didn't do something as your coach to support you, because that's how much I believe that the microbiome holds the key. And it's not just on the research. I see it in my practice.
Yeah, I think that's it clinically, true. For instance, we see a lot of patients in what we do who have oxalate sensitivity. Guess what? Oxalate sensitivity, guess what the microbiome? Low bifidobacterium, low lactobacillus.
And the oxalobacter formigens is an specific bacteria that digests oxalates
So you're not
or
absorbing as much
lectins,
oxalate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can help with those things, histamine sensitivity, guess what? You're missing those same three. And you go, wow, maybe we need to look at that. Like, why do you have histamine sensitivity? Why? Because once if they digest the stuff, like we know with diabetes too, diabetics, a lot of them will have low acrobancia, and that helps digest the sugar before you even absorb it. Wouldn't you rather poop it out and absorb it there and let those guys take care of it? But if you, so we see these, it's there, the science is there. We don't understand it. Like, how do we fix the problem? But we do know that if you're stressed and tense, and pregnancy, the gut microbiome changes. Menopause, the gut microbiome changes. Testosterone deficiency, they all go hand. They have a huge influence on each other. Depression, anxiety, vitamin D deficiency, B12
And we haven't even
deficiency,
talked about sleep. Sleep, one
sleep.
day of sleep really affects they've seen it trending down of the microbial diversity. So sleep is huge, stress is huge.
Sun exposure, being out in the sun helps the diapers, all
Antibiotics,
these things. Yeah.
PPIs, I've seen a lot of people struggle with that, and that's notorious. People are on PPIs for like forever without even asking themselves, why am I still on this? Am I still symptomatic? So that I see a lot of, and drugs definitely,
Pancreatic insufficiency, right? All these kind of
yeah,
things. We're not digesting your
enzymes.
food right, and enzymes and breaking them down. There's so much to it, Tro. There's more science than we think there is, but we still don't understand. We're at the infancy, like, but it's one of those things we have to say, huh? Like and I'll tell you, and I just want to throw this out the last second because this is something I saw, Tro. I would love to hear both of your takes if you have an idea, because I don't have an idea, but I know what I'm seeing. I was in Guatemala. We're in an underserved area. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and these doctors insist that if they give their poorly, I mean, we're talking people like 120, 130 pounds that have sugars in the 500 range, 400 range. And they say if we give them milk, they do better. Their sugars come down. I go, there's a lot of sugar in milk. But they go, it gets better. And they've been telling me, you've heard me talk about it probably before, Tro. So I go, I'm going. And the sponsor of my other podcast is Health Code. So I said, I'm going to take Health Code and just see. I think it's a malnourishment problem. I don't have insulin. I don't have labs I can do on all these people. But I have a lady that came in, her sugars were 556. And we documented it twice. And we gave her a thing of Health Code. I go, come back in an hour and 20 minutes. Don't eat anything. And she comes back an hour. Her sugar's 280. 280. I don't see that in the US. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. So another guy, so I did this with 4 people. The minimal drop in sugar I saw was 50 points, right? 50. Everyone dropped. The least was 50, 120, 180, whatever. Anyways, I'm like, what can this possibly be? So I go back and I go, what nutritional deficiencies are consistent with diabetes? Number one,
Magnesium, selenium. Yep.
magnesium,
Yep.
selenium, zinc, vitamin
Zinc.
D3,
Yep.
omega-3, and it's all in there. And I was like, I wonder. But how can it happen so fast? I think they don't make enough insulin is what I think. And I think it's helping their
It
either
is.
the gut to digest or something.
100%.
But
No, it's insulin product. It's a beta cell. Like if you want to make your beta cells sluggish, you make them magnesium and zinc and selenium deficient, right? Like
so
that's
that quickly was like a jump start. And we've seen this here. Like everyone was laughing. They go, this is ridiculous. How can this be happening? And
yeah.
it may be some of the fiber in there that's blocking some of the gut absorption of sugar. Who knows? There's a lot of factors, but this is something we need to look at, from a
Yeah,
nutritional deficiency.
Yeah, please, both of you, Brian. I know you're used to my like questioning but I knew it's just exploring our disagreements, and I feel like the listener benefits when we disagree because they hear sort of the back and forth, and I appreciate you coming on, and Brian, I appreciate you so much, with everything that you've done. So I just wanted to thank you both
no, thank
and
you.
clarify that. I can't wait to read the book, and I'm very excited. Now I'm going to follow you and keep. I know you got a YouTube. I'm so excited to meet you, and I'm glad Brian brought you on.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah, I
am.
definitely will send you a copy of the book. And I love a good discussion. I think science cannot advance without, having proper discussions and I feel like we are kind of intermediary here between the layperson and researchers who give us the science, and to just really break down the science and really understand it, and just say, okay, this is what a research study is saying is so important. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you, Dr. Lancis, for having me on again. And it was really fun.
Yeah, it's
And
always fun. Yeah. And
yeah,
Tro's
we
gonna
could
spin
talk
his
about
brain.
strains and
Brian's already
perspectives.
pissed. He's like, you should be.
Yeah, we could talk. Yeah, we'll get you back on Life's Best Medicine. We'll talk about it again. And anyone who hasn't, go and listen to that. It was a great discussion. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that a lot. And how do people track you down if they want to find you?
Well, they can they go to ninearmsofwellness.com. That's my website, and they can pre-order my book, and also Nine Arms of Wellness on Instagram. Yeah.
And
Awesome.
tell people the name of your book again in case they want to track it down on
It's
Amazon or
called
wherever.
Flourish from Within. The within meaning microbiome.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Tro, thanks
Okay.
for putting up with us. It was fun discussion.
Thank
And I think
you.
people listening, I think this is the take home look. We can't be too dogmatic in what we're doing. And I know Tro doesn't think people are dogmatic, but yes, people are dogmatic. I've experienced it talking to some of my patients saying, hey, let's just try this. What's the harm, right? Let's just see what
Yeah.
happens.
But
And when we
I
see the
do agree
numbers,
with Dr. Trio, because half truths, I mean, I understand that because we're all biased.
I've never met, in my patients, I've never met it. Nobody we've ever interviewed, Brian. I never felt like, even like the hardcore, carnivores, they're like, whatever works. So I've never
yeah.
met it, I've never met, on social media they exist. I think they're bots.
Yeah,
So,
maybe bots, but I see it
yeah.
like again. I'll tell you that because the Paul Saladino thing made me think. I was like, "What's he doing?" Like he changed. And so one of my patients was criticized about how can he say one thing? You have to be. He wrote a whole book on carnivore, head to nose to tail, or whatever. And now he's eating fruit and vegetables. Like, how dare him? I'm like, he evolved.
Yeah,
He evolved.
I think for him it was, an autoimmune issue, but also he was
But
losing
why?
so many
Okay.
electrolytes.
But what? Okay, autoimmune issues. Where does the
No,
autoimmune
no, no,
issues
no.
come
The
from?
other, no, no, no. It got improved with carnivore, and then he reintroduced foods because he was losing electrolytes. He had to do like 2 grams of salt, 3 grams of salt, tons of magnesium because his insulin was so low and he's so metabolically well, right? He's just basically peeing out, a whole bunch of calcium and salt, and it makes sense for somebody like him, to
Yeah, he's metabolically
reintroduce.
healthy. I get it. But
Yeah.
he got himself that way through carnivore. Okay. So I'm saying is like, I think we have to look and say, let's follow long term. And when we have long term data, then we know, right? We're going to be able to see.
No long-term data on any of this, like, just do one of these and hope that everybody does okay. Like, I
Good
mean,
stuff.
that's just my thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
It's
think we
all
all
best
have a
guess. It's
bias
all best
towards what
guess.
we believe in, but ultimately we're here to kind of just break down science and what has a little bit of data behind it. And I hope that the hundreds and thousands of really well done studies on the microbiome will at least get other people interested in the microbiome. That's a good starting point. I think we can all agree on. Let's learn more about the microbiome and all these forever guests within us, and how to take care of them. I mean, that can't be it's not a difficult ask, to at least get interested in it. I think that's where I would like to end and say, just be curious, just be interested in learning more, and see where that journey takes you.
Yeah, it'd be curious, and if what you're doing is working, keep doing it. If it's not working, then change a variable. Tro,
That's
this is
it.
what we do,
That's
right?
that's the that's the best advice I've heard, which is if it's working for you, keep doing it, make small improvements, try stuff, and if it helps you, keep it. If it doesn't, I think the problem with diet, and I'm sure you all agree with, modulating the microbiome, it takes months. So for the listener, if you're doing any intervention, remember it's a months thing. An elimination diet, same thing. It's not often day one or week one that you're going to see something. So if you're trying something, make sure to give it enough time. Thank you so much, both of you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It was
Sorry to be
fun.
so
Thanks so much.
hostile, but it's all meant in
You're
goodness.
not hostile, Tro.
Yeah.
You
You're
were
not
not
hostile.
hostile. I didn't feel
For a
that
New
at all.
Yorker, yeah, for a New Yorker.
I
Us
Yeah.
just got
West Coast people
excited.
are.
I thought, how do
Good.
I?
Good. Yeah, good, good. That's how it was meant. Okay, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's fun to have this go, okay, like, and we're all saying, hey, let's do whatever works best for that patient or for us, and risk and benefit and all those kind of good things. And again, I know you don't think anyone's
I
dogmatic.
would
but-
love to talk to you guys just about the different kinds of fiber there are and, come up with a goal for all our listeners, like for a week of just trying fiber along with their low carb diet. If you guys accept the challenge, I'm ready to
Yeah,
try.
I would love to do
Yeah,
it. I would love to. Let's discuss it. We could do it on Life's Best Medicine or
Yeah, and
wherever. You and
I'm
I could
happy to
just
do
get
a book
together.
takeaway,
Yeah, put me on a
a
regimen. I'll do it. I'll do any testing you want me to do. So you let me know. We'll put
Oh, cool.
yeah.
True. I'm gonna just tell you one anecdote just to end. I was reading about this inulin, all this stuff. So I go, I'm just gonna add it to my Greek yogurt at lunchtime. And then we went to a friend's house Friday night. They had wine and cheese and a keto plate. Everything was out. And they go, we made you. And I was like, nothing looks good. I wasn't hungry at all. And I wasn't thinking about it. I was like, this is crazy. Usually I'll have a glass of wine. I was like, I'm happy with my sparkling water. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And then on our way back to the house, I thought, oh, that's right. Because they thought I had my stomach messed up from Guatemala. And I'm like, I just wasn't like, none of it sounds. So I think it's this short chain fatty acids and satiety thing, Tro. I think there's something to that. We'll see. We'll see.
Could be.
So
Yeah,
I know. Thank you for your wisdom and for sharing
Yeah.
with us. Great to have
Brian,
you.
would you mind sending me your address?
Yeah, I'll
So
send
I
that
can
for
send you
sure.
the book? Yeah. Thank
No,
you.
Let's
she
do
doesn't
that.
want mine. No, she doesn't want mine. See?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I want yours too.
No, just-
All right.
guys. Have a
Have
good
a great Memorial weekend to everyone.
Bye.
one. All right. Bye.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon by going to lowcarbmd.com.